For this video, there's going to be sources in the comments. So if you would like to look at any of the research that I have taken a look at and gathered for the making of this video, they will be in the comments and they will be linked. Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be looking at the school system and does it even really need a change? I decided to put together a massive, and I mean massive, amount of research. This is probably going to be one of my biggest videos so far because I strongly believe the school system needs to be changed. So I put together a massive amount of reforms and we're going to be going over those in this video. In the US, colleges often tell students to expect about 2 hours and sometimes more of homework for every hour of class, which means a typical 3-credit course often involves around 6 credit hours of work per week outside the classroom. At the same time, most high schoolers will start the day before 8:30 a.m., even though the American Academy of Pediatrics and later studies recommend that middle and high schools begin no earlier than 8:30 a.m. to match team sleep patterns. Teachers who carry this whole system only earned about 73 cents for every dollar that similar college-educated professionals made in 2024, according to the Economic Policy Institute and related analysis of the teacher pay penalty. Meanwhile, associate degrees still usually require around 60 credits, roughly 20 courses on paper designed to take 2 years of full-time study, which many students struggle to balance with work and life. This is not about calling that system purely good or bad. It is about taking it apart so you can see how it actually works and why targeted changes like test retakes, shorter readings, fewer simultaneous classes, better pay, and phased-in free college makes sense inside the mechanics of this own system. The first mechanism is how schools use one-shot tests to sort students instead of pushing them towards mastery. Benjamin Bloom's Learning for Mastery work and follow-up studies show that when students get clear goals, feedback, extra time, and chances to relearn and retest, a large majority can reach high levels of performance instead of the usual bell curve. Empirical studies across different subjects report that mastery learning strategies, where students must hit a standard before moving on, tend to raise average test scores and reduce gaps between high and low achieving students compared with traditional models. In many current schools and colleges, though, a single test can weigh so heavily that one bad day drags a student's overall grade down for the rest of the term, which nudges them toward cramming instead of revisiting what they missed. A system that lets students retake major tests up to 3 times with required review or practice between each attempt fits the research on mastery learning by turning assessments into checkpoints rather than dead ends, while still putting a reasonable cap on unlimited retries. The second mechanism is how the system puts attention into too many classes and too much weekly reading at once. In the US, it is common for high schools to run 6 to 8 separate class periods per day, meaning students juggle that many subjects, homework streams, and test schedules at the same time. On the college side, widely used credit hour rules and advising guides tell students to expect about 2 hours or more of study time per week for each credit hour. So a standard 15 credit load can easily mean around 30 hours of weekly homework and study on top of class time. When it comes to reading, teaching centers and faculty discussions describe norms of roughly 40 to 75 pages of assigned reading per week in many upper-level undergraduate humanities courses, and some graduate students describe reading loads in the high hundreds of pages across all their classes in a busy week. Under these conditions, many students skip readings altogether, or memorize just enough for the next quiz, which weakens true understanding and shifting high school from 8-year-long classes to 4 more intensive ones at a time, and trimming college loads from 4 to 3 simultaneous courses without cutting in-class hours would reduce this fragmentation and let students focus more deeply on each subject at a time. The third mechanism is a mismatch between school schedules, adolescent biology, and life outside the classroom. The American Academy of Pediatrics and later meta-analyses conclude that middle and high school start times of 8:30 a.m. or later are linked to longer sleep, better mood, and improved attendance and grades compared with earlier start times. Despite that, many example schedules for U.S. high schools still run roughly from around 7:30 a.m. to about 3 p.m., according to descriptions of typical school days. Health and sleep researchers note that teens naturally fall asleep later and need about 8 to 10 hours of sleep, so stacked early mornings, sports practices, jobs, and heavy homework load them with chronic sleep loss. When districts that have pushed start times later are studied, researchers report increases in nightly sleep of about 30 to 60 minutes and improvements in attendance and self-reported well-being, without notable drops in achievement, and a schedule that runs from 9:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. for secondary schools. Even with shorter or fewer classes, would align more closely with these findings while freeing time for jobs and extracurriculars. The fourth mechanism lives in how degree requirements and required courses are structured. Across community colleges and universities, multiple guides explain that most associate degrees require about 60 credits, which usually breaks down into around 20 classes completed over about 2 years of full-time study. General education frameworks at many institutions reserve a sizable portion of those credits, often a dozen courses or more, for broad requirements in areas like natural science, humanities, math, and social science, even when a student's major is something like graphic design or liberal arts. While a broad foundation can be useful, reports from students and advisors point out that requirements like chemistry or college algebra can feel disconnected from some majors and add time and stress to already tight schedules. When students take on too many unrelated requirements, they often do just enough to pass and forget most of it later, instead of building depth where they actually need it. So reducing an associate plan from around 16 to 20 courses to something closer to 12 concentrated classes in the student's area and dropping the least related requirements would match the idea that school should cover essentials and let college be the place where people branch into more specialized topics. The fifth mechanism concerns how money, capacity, and teacher pay shape who can learn and who can teach. Economic Policy Institute data show that in 2024, teachers earned about 73.1 cents for every dollar that similar professionals earned, and that the regression-adjusted weekly wage gap, or teacher pay penalty, reached a record 26.9% that year compared with just 6.1% in 1996. A summary from the Center for Economic and Policy Research similarly notes that in 2024, earned roughly 73 cents on the dollar compared with other college graduates, confirming that gap. State-level analysis of new teacher salary laws find that when minimum salaries rise by several $1,000s per year, districts see retention improvements on the order of 1 to 3 percentage points for affected teachers, which means fewer empty classrooms and less constant rehiring. On the higher education side, guides for prospective students emphasize that associate's degrees still typically require about 60 credits and that full-time students are expected to finish it in about 2 years. But rising tuition and fees make it harder for many to attend without large loans or heavy work hours. And at the same time, research on online and virtual labs finds mixed but promising results, with controlled studies showing that when online labs include interactive tasks and feedback, students can achieve learning gains similar to traditional labs for many outcomes, though purely simulation-only formats are often rated as less effective or less engaging by instructors and students. If these mechanisms explain some of what feels off in school today, they also point toward how changes could help. A policy that lets students retake tests up to 3 times with required review between attempts and a cap on the time window lines up with mastery learning research showing that repeated, structured practice and reassessment can push far more students toward higher performance. When instructors trim readings down to a few pages per week that focus tightly on the main ideas, studies on student textbook use suggest that students are more likely to actually read and understand the material instead of abandoning it when assignments pile up. High schools that run 4 longer classes at a time instead of 6 to 8 shorter ones, and colleges that cut from 4 to 3 classes per term without shrinking class time, would be reducing cognitive switching costs in a way that matches what is known about attention and workload. making challenging courses like chemistry, calculus, and pre-calculus opt-in for students who need them for future plans instead of blanket requirements, still leaves pathways open for aspiring scientists and engineers while giving everyone else more room to build strong reading, writing, and basic quantitative skills. There are clear upsides for teachers and institutions too. Economic analyses show that raising teacher pay substantially enough to narrow the documented 26.9% wage penalty and the roughly 17% total compensation gap identified in national data for 2024 would make the profession more competitive and sustainable. Studies from states that recently increased minimum teacher salaries report that even modest percentage point gains in retention translate into more stable staffs and better continuity for students, which is hard to achieve when many teachers leave early in their careers. Research on later school start times suggests that when secondary schools move closer to 8:30 a.m. or later, students gain roughly half an hour to an hour more sleep, report better mood, and show better attendance and grades, which also improves classroom climate for teachers. Phasing in free tuition at public colleges that already receive government money by cutting the original price in stages over several years would attack one of the major barriers identified in financial and advising guidelines, which is that the cost of a 60-credit associate degree often pushes students to overwork or borrow heavily. And expanding campuses while also building strong online course and lab options follows evidence that well-designed online labs and immersive materials can support learning in science courses when they include structured activities and feedback. And it would let schools serve more people without just packing more bodies into the same rooms. Once you notice these patterns, you might start noticing them in the way your own school or college sets tests, reading loads, schedules, and degree requirements. Students and parents can ask for policies like limited test retakes, shorter but more focused readings, later start times closer to 8:30 a.m. or beyond, and schedules with fewer simultaneous classes, pointing to the research on mastery learning, sleep, and workload when they make their case. Community members can also support efforts to raise teacher pay and to make public college progressively cheaper. Knowing that current data shows a 73 on the cent dollar wage gap for teachers and a 60 credit expectation for many associate degrees that together make the system harder on both sides of the classroom. Understanding how the system works means you are not just reacting to stress or overload. You can decide which ideas, like cutting to 3 college classes per term, making advanced math and science optional, or expanding online labs, make the most sense for creating schools that focus on real learning instead of just constant pressure. Thank you for watching this video. Again, I put a very large amount of research into this video. The associate's degree thing does not just apply for the associate's degree, it can apply for other degrees, for example, like bachelor's or higher. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe. It helps so much. With my MLA sources, they take very, very long time, so there is a slight chance that I just move back to just citing the sources in the description using just the link, because these MLA sources, I think I spend about half my time just citing the sources, and it's definitely a little bit frustrating getting the date wrong 5 times in a row because I looked at the wrong access date or whatever. But enough rambling, and I'll leave you guys to go do the rest of your work. I hope you have a great day, and I hope you come back to watch another video. Goodbye.